And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving towards the panel discussion. May I please invite on stage Mr. Mike Korchinsky, and he will be putting more light onto the very fact of rural futures of transformation of tea. And let me tell you a little about Mr. Mike Korchinsky. He is the co-founder, CEO, and president of Wildlife Works, an organization committed to creating a sustainable economic base for wildlife survival, shaped by years of Mr. Korchinsky's experience as a management consultant. Mr. Korchinsky will introduce the panelists to you and set the context for today's dialogue on rural futures transformation of tea. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give him a resounding applause and welcome Mr. Korchinsky. All right, Prabhi sir, can I please have you here with me on stage? Because sir has a few questions, probably you could, if you could answer to his question. So he wanted to know if elephants loves tea. So could you please, yes.
Well, I think one of the largest organic tea and pepper farms is called Hathi Kuli, which means frequented by elephants. So I assume they do love tea.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, by the time Mr. Mike is here with us, I would like to introduce the rest of the panelists. I welcome Mr. Ketan, Patel, Mr. Conrad, Disha, Barooah, and Eliza Mills to please join us on stage and take their respective seat. So here we have all the panelists, Ketan Patel, Conrad, Disha, Barooah, and Eliza Mills. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a resounding applause.
Hello. Yes, it's working. Fantastic. I am Mike Korchinsky. Sorry, I missed my introduction. I had to have some tea. As we're going to be talking about rural futures in the context of tea and how the tea industry is transforming into the future. So that's the topic of the conversation. I will start, I think, with there's a little video about the work that we do, which will give you some context about why I'm here. We work in the conservation of high conservation value landscapes around the world, not yet in India, but I was invited to this conference to see what all the amazing things that are really going on here and see whether the work that we're doing is relevant to this landscape. So there's a little video. I don't know if the person running the video ran it. Or is there a video guy there?
Hello, excuse me. The video?
Is there a video? Where is he? Video guy. Oh, here he comes. So we'll run a little video that just shows you, in a couple minutes, the work that we're doing in Africa. So Africa is where we started. I'm in this, having left the corporate world 20-some years ago, because I'm an elephant fan. So my passion for elephants is what got me into this, and I'm super happy that you have elephants in this landscape as well. But you're going to see something. I don't know if there's...
Something amazing is happening in Kenya's Kazakh Corridor. Today, the spectacular 500,000-acre forest, known as the Kazakh Corridor, is home to thousands of elephants and growing population of lion, cheetah, giraffe, grevy's zebras, and even wild dogs. But just 20 years ago, the Kazakh Corridor was on a fast track to becoming a barren wasteland. It was being cleared for charcoal and slash-and-burn agriculture by a desperate community of 100,000 people who were suffering from extreme poverty, with little access to education or healthcare, and one of the highest rates of HIV in the world. What made the difference? Wildlife Works. Wildlife Works protects wildlife by making conservation work for local communities. For the past 20 years, Wildlife Works has pioneered conservation solutions in the Kazakh Corridor by working with local community and over 5,000 landowners. Wildlife Works created the first REDD+ forestry carbon project in the world. REDD+ projects create economic incentive to protect the forest and keep the trees standing by rewarding landowners and communities for stopping deforestation. The reward is in carbon credits, or VERs, verified emission reductions. Each VER represents 1 ton of emissions avoided. These VERs are sold to forward-thinking companies who want to reduce their carbon footprint. Protecting the Kazakh Corridor avoids emitting more than 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide per year. And with millions of dollars in sales of VERs, the Kazakh Corridor REDD+ project has provided over 300 wildlife-friendly jobs, scholarship money awarded to over 3,000 students, 15 new schools benefiting 8,500 children. Water projects now provide safe drinking water to 25,000 people. Over 50,000 trees have been planted to reforest degraded slopes. Over 500 women's groups selling handmade crafts. And eco-charcoal is being produced without cutting down a single tree. To learn more about the success of the Kazakh Corridor Red Plus project, go to wildlifeworks.com.
Okay, so, thanks. So that's actually quite a small project for us in Kenya, which is where we started. We now work in 5 countries. The largest project we run is in the Congo, the DRC, in Africa. It's 130,000 square kilometers. So it's a little bit more than 1.5 times the size of Assam, essentially. But the significant difference is that there are only 2 million people living there, as in that 130,000 square kilometers. But many of the same challenges you find, I think they're just going to be heightened here because of the population density here. So I have experience in transforming landscapes, but I'm not a tea expert. I confess I'm a coffee drinker, like many Americans. So the panel I have is tea experts. So we're going to hear from them today about how they're addressing the many challenges that we've heard exist in these rural communities, and how tea can continue to play a role or facilitate this transformation, starting with their own businesses. So to begin with, we're going to hear from somebody who's really solved many of these challenges in his own work. So, Jalinga.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry to keep everyone away from their lunch, I think. But I think we still have a good attendance. My name is Ketan, Patel. We have a tea estate, Jalinga tea estate in South Assam. Silchar is the airport. It's one of the largest organic tea estates in India. We do about 900 tons of organic teas. We are also the only carbon neutral certified tea estate in the world. We've done a carbon footprint assessment by Soil & More, and we got certified carbon neutral. We've also given 4,000 cooking stoves to all our workers, no emission cooking stove. So that's good for the health, good for the environment. The byproduct we use as charcoal and use it in our dryers, so we've cut our coal consumption. And we registered for the first carbon credit project ever with a tea estate in the world with Atmosphere in Germany. And a first set of carbon credits we'll start receiving from March next year. We're not stopping there. We're changing our electricity requirements to solar panels. We're also removing coal. In the next 2 years, we're going to stop using coal, and it'll be all biomass-generated pellets. What started as our passion has now led to the fact that going climate-friendly is actually reducing our cost. So we're setting up a climate tea research foundation at Jalinga, where we're going to do more extensive research in terms of climate-friendly way of producing tea. So that's a project that's coming up next year. We've also started working with smallholders, small farmers in the region. So we handhold them with the organic technology, we certify them organic and fair trade, add value, build long-term partnership with them, and we buy back and export. So this year has been our first year working with smallholders, 32 smallholders, about 60,000 kgs of teas. And it's been very exciting. I meet with them every month. I sit and discuss their issues. Being the first year, it was very critical for me to be hands-on. This next year, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to scale our project to 500 tons from current 60 tons, all working with small farmers in the region, building partnership. We're not stopping at just tea. We have started doing spices, herbs, chamomile, and whatnot, and we'll hand over that know-how in terms of growing spices and herbs to them as well, because all the buyers worldwide who buy our organic teas, they buy herbs and spices as well. And we're also soon coming up with a brand called Farmer Zone, which will be showcasing organic produce directly sourced from smallholders, farmers in India, and we will brand it and market it in India and overseas as well. Lastly, we've also, last month at the North American Tea Conference in Niagara, Jalinga, we won the Sustainability Award. So that has been a big thing for us, coming from a small region in south of Assam, which was never recognized to make quality teas, and teas were never known to be exported worldwide. We're doing not just CTC teas there, we're doing oolong, white tea, orthodox. We are doing matcha green tea powders with some help from my Japanese producer friends. So it's just a mindset. Things are changing in Assam. The wages are increasing. The migration of workers is happening. So it's going to be a very tough time for the industry to sustain until they don't think a little differently and broaden their horizon. We've also created our own brand, and that is really doing well in India. It's called Tea Tales, and we've just launched it in the Middle East, and we've got a sign up in the US and Europe as well to partner our brand. So I think things in the industry don't look good with the wage increase because they've still been looking at it in a very old school way of thinking. So the idea is to embrace the community and working in partnership. I feel there's a huge opportunity. Not just tea, but various other products. And lastly, we're going to show you a video at the end of this seminar and at the panel discussion. It's Jalinga Tea Run. We're having a music festival and a fun run on November 16th, 17th, 18th. It's in Jalinga, inside the plantation. So people are coming from all over the world. About 25 buyers from all over the world are coming for 2 nights and 3 days. We've got Usha Uttup concert. We've got jazz band, DJ. We've got a lot of pop-up exhibition showcasing Assam. And then on Sunday is a fun run, 3, 5, 10 and a half marathon inside the plantation. And whatever we would collect would all go to charity to my 4,000 workers and the children and towards building a home for special kids at Jalinga. So that's actually my big project for the year. And I'm super excited. I've not done any business in the last 4 months because this new project, first year, is taking us so much time. But yeah, so if anyone is around, it's November 16th, 17th, 18th in Silchar Airport. It's a pick up and drop off, everything all taken care of. You just need to show up and see what we are doing with that whole region. It's going to be fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ketan. And now that's one end of the state and one end of the tea business. We're going to go to the other end and the other scale of the tea business with Conrad Dennis, who is with Amalgamated and who is the editor, I believe, of the magazine that they produce, which is called Organic Growth. And so he's going to explain to us the challenges as they see it at the large scale in tea in India.
Thank you, Mike. I think the tagline for this panel discussion is apt and real time. The transformation and the change in tea is actually upon us. And my thoughts are going to be a little bit Nostradamus-like, but they stem from a genuine concern that if we do not change our mode and manner of functioning, I think the regulated tea industry is going to become extinct. It's going to go the dinosaur way. 17 years ago, Kodak employed 170,000 people and was a multi-billion-dollar company. But they did not accept and adapt to the digital revolution. And what we don't know is that in 1975, a gentleman called Steve Basson invented the digital camera. It was as large as a toaster. It had furry images. It needed to be linked to a television set. And who did he work for? Kodak. So we need to change the tea industry as it is today unless we do something disruptive. Things are going to be very, very difficult. We have to move away from our colonial mindset. At that time, when the tea gardens were set up, it was probably correct and apt. I'm just going to give you 2 examples as to how we need to move away. When I joined tea, a little before that, each sub-district had a priest. He was supposed to keep all the planters on the straight and narrow. He failed miserably, but that's a different story. So this priest was invited to the garden where I was, Samsung Tea Estate in Dohas, and he had a lovely evening with the senior manager and his wife. And as he was leaving, the senior manager presented him with a bottle of cherry brandy. So he went back home, and the next day, you know, decency demanded he write a note. And I saw that beautifully calligraphed note. Dear John and Sarah, thank you very much for a lovely evening of food and fellowship. Full stop. I thank you for the fruit and the spirit in which it was given. So today we need to be more upright. We need to be more transparent. And then not all of us who can actually read between the lines and decipher insinuation and innuendo. So we got to change a little bit. The other thing is, when I joined T. Duncan, brothers used to give you a pony loan. So this planter applied and got a pony loan, and immediately he wrote to the company and said, thank you so much for sanctioning your loan, and please insure the pony in my name. So they wrote back is that, we can't insure it in your name because you've taken a loan. And he said, no, you can recover the loan, but you must insure the pony in my name. And this went back and forth until at last there was a letter which said, dear sir, reference my mails dated so-and-so and your letters dated so-and-so, I regret to inform you your horse is dead. So what we need to do is to cut through the bureaucratic red tape, take quick decisions which are relevant. And the first step in this direction for our industry to survive is to change something called the Plantation Labor Act. This act is anachronistic. It was formed in 1951. And we need to exorcise the sections and subsections which are not relevant today. That's the first step. The second is we need to realize and see the shift from the traditional planter in his ivory tower and the small tea grower who is spreading across Assam so very successfully, doing amazingly well. And my colleague Jatin has beautifully put forward in his presentation. In 1975, I visited a garden in Assam, and there were two hard caste categories. There was the big boys, and there were the proprietary gardens. 3 years later, a new category of tea was spawned. In 1978, Someshwar Bora, who was the agriculture minister, legalized the small tea grower. At the end of 78, there were 16 tea gardens, 3,000 kgs of tea were made. 1986, 800 small tea growers, 30,000 kgs of tea made. 1995, 10,700 small tea growers, and 1,70,000 kgs made. In 2016, there were 1,04,000 small tea growers, and 3.18 million kgs of tea were produced by them. Today, they contribute 4,000 crores to the GDP directly. They contribute 13,000 crores to the GDP indirectly. They have a growth rate of 26% CAGR. Today, the small tea grower has holistically redefined tea growing. And I think that is, in a manner of speaking, the correct way forward, and the big boys will have to adapt to that. To my mind, I think that we, in terms of whether it's sustainability, whether it's operations, we need to stop looking at things as they are and asking ourselves why, and we need to look at things as they ought to be and ask ourselves why not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great perspective on the history, a little bit of this region in tea as well, from somebody who lived through it. Our next panelist also is from Assam, from a different area, Disha Barooah, and she is going to talk a little bit about her work in the consumer end of the tea business and how she's beginning to try and create value in the minds of consumers that will be necessary ultimately if we want to try and embed some of these sustainability and conservation values in the production of products coming out of the Assam landscape. So please.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, so my name is Disha Barooah. A brief introduction of myself and how I've landed up where I am. So I belong to a tea planter family in Jorhat. If I would have gotten into manufacturing, I would have been the 5th generation. But marketing was my interest. I was in Delhi for 7 years where I did luxury marketing and PR. Now, a lot of these meetings would happen in hotels like the Taj, Oberoi, these kind of hotels. And most of my clients who were very health conscious would obviously opt for a cup of green tea or Darjeeling tea. And being from Assam, my first question to them would be, oh, what tea do you like to drink? And they would say, oh, we love the Darjeeling tea from, Twinings. And being the agency, I'd have to foot the bill, and that would be 300 rupees for a cup of tea bag, Twinings of London. While they're in India, Darjeeling is in India, but that tea bag's gone all the way to London and become their favorite tea. So, I mean, my job was marketing. It was storytelling. And what I realized was, I don't think it's a flaw with the product, but it was a flaw with the story. Because I believe that people buy stories. I mean, it's not whether one product is different from another product, it's the story that you're putting into it. It's what idea are you selling? And I think the idea of tea in India has been more commodity and less consciously crafted product. So that's what I try to change. So I don't associate with any one particular thing, but I try and buy tea from anybody who's making a quality, good cup of tea and eliminate the middleman and take it straight to the consumer so that, I mean, we are, after all, the 2nd largest tea growing country in the world, and China is the 1st. And when I think we talk about transformation, where that opportunity for transformation lies for us, I think would be to treat tea not as a business, but as a culture. Because when you look at something like a culture, it's a lot more inclusive than short-term profits. It's a lot more inclusive of vision, of mission, and it's more conscious in these things. Now, a lot of my colleagues who are working with, the carbon footprint, they're managing, like Ketan's managing that, Lisa's managing elephant friendly. I think all that just helps people to sort of know that this is a consciously crafted product. And if prices are going to be slightly higher for that, then it's going to be reinvestment in bettering the conditions behind the scenes. So I think storytelling, I think consumer education, and I think presenting the product is what we need to do to be able to bring about the transformation that we want to see in the industry. So that's what I have to say for now. And right now what I'm doing is Serenytea. It's a brand that I've started where I buy, I package, and then I take that tea forward using channels like corporate gifting, tea, because I think people are a lot more sensitive to even a small price difference and very critical of their evaluation of that tea. So the reason I go through corporate gifts and try to hand out more tea than sell more tea is because I want to first get people to taste, because I think that's what's missing. I mean, you walk around anywhere in Delhi or Bombay, I think it's very difficult to find a cup of tea that's come straight from a tea garden. And you'll find a lot of other tea that's come from all over and everywhere, and you're paying all those premiums, but what quality are you actually receiving? So I think freshness is something that will help us improve the consumer experience also for tea. And direct-to-consumer and conscious product is, I think, one way where at least I think I can bring about some change. So that's what I'm trying to do with my startup. Talk about tea as a story, treat it like a culture, talk about the lifestyles of the people who work on the field and the people who lead those people as well. Because I think it's a very interesting space, and I think it's very underexposed, and I think, I hope I can take this forward with what I'm trying to do.
Thank you very much, Disha. And our next panelist is Lisa Mills, who's a fellow from the United States, from the University of Montana. Some of you know her from previous conferences. Lisa will talk a little bit about additional values that we'd like to see in the context of conservation within this sustainable landscape. So we know elephants are in this landscape, and we know that they have to exist alongside, in some cases, these tea plantations. And so Lisa is working on that interface between elephants and tea, and attempting to make it a positive for the future inclusion of positive values in tea. So she's going to show a few slides and explain the work that she's doing.
This picture
was taken by Anshuma Basumatari, who now is employed by the Balapara Foundation in the Udalguri Landscape Mission Project. Anyway, my entry into tea, when he said there's a panel of tea experts, I have to say I am by no means a tea expert, okay? But I'm not an elephant expert either. I'm really an educator about wildlife, especially endangered species around the world. But I did start a project with communities in Bhutan and India, a transboundary elephant project. And that was called Elephants on the Line. It was a 2-year project a few years back. But it did lay the groundwork for my interest in tea and the certified elephant-friendly tea program. Okay, so I work for University of Montana Broader Impacts Group, and this group, it is our goal to bring the most current science and available resources out to the world so that we can make meaningful change using what's available to us that is known in the world of science. And one of the things that I felt was important is to take advantage of this opportunity at the University of Montana, which has a very strong wildlife biology program. It's top ranked one in North America. What we needed to do is to see how we could make a difference through innovation. Try to look at things a bit differently. And in this project, in the tea region of Assam, with the Transboundary Elephant Program, we involved a lot of villagers in just watching and telling their stories of what was happening with elephants, the deaths of elephants, the conflicts happening with people. And during this project, we certainly heard a lot of stories about elephants getting in trouble in tea plantations. A lot of you have seen this picture that was making the rounds on the internet pretty recently. This is in West Bengal, and I'm not even sure that it was tracked who took the original picture, so I apologize. I don't know who took it. I'm just using it. But this is a common occurrence. I've seen this kind of scene many times in India. Elephants being moved out by villagers through stressful conflicts. Okay. Well, one thing that we wanted to do is to look at what was happening to the elephants, and we noticed that there was a strong overlap between tea communities and tea plantations and some of the things that were going on with elephants that were escalating over time. There is obvious loss of habitat that's historical. So when the tea plantations were first established in the 1800s, obviously they took away somebody's habitat to grow tea. And that loss of habitat continued and expanded as communities built around tea. Other activities, social and economic activities were happening that would further take away habitat. Also, all these people taking firewood out of the forest has an effect on the health of forests, and so a loss there, and other activities. So human-elephant conflict also comes when elephants need to continue to move great distances to get enough resources. And they encounter humans, they raid crops, they're going to go for what they can get to survive. We also were finding reports, and I think a lot of you are familiar with this, a lot of elephants being poisoned, and we can talk about that, but when their bodies are tested, there's post-mortems and reports done, and often we'll find that agricultural chemicals are found in their bodies, and this could be anything from young elephants getting into a pile of fertilizers because of the salts they're attracted to. We've seen 6 elephants die at once in one spot just from getting into a pile of fertilizers before. There are other chemical situations. As recently as this June, I was in Udalguri district just driving along the road, and we saw tea workers from a conventional tea estate dumping chemicals straight into the river and turning it bright yellow right into the river, and they hadn't a clue that there was a rule against it. So we don't necessarily come around to monitor each individual tea estate. We're looking for setting kind of a new vision. How can we look at reducing some of these situations in positive ways? Ditch hazards, we've been seeing on average, I believe the number is around 4 elephants per year in Assam alone falling into one kind of another ditch and dying. And so, there are ditch hazards when you have tea estates that have a standardized ditch. We understand that elephants are pretty smart. They can work their way around a lot of these. But in the case of newborn baby elephants, I'll show you a photo in a minute, it's hard to cross a ditch of that size, and we often lose young elephants, especially to the ditches. Just basically being careful, we can mitigate some of the situations where there's a high movement area where young babies are commonly moving through. Some of the tea gardens, like Hatikuli is an example where they have a grate that elephants walk down a road and can move over this grate that's put over a ditch. And the elephants, even the babies, can cross safely right through that to get over to the stream. That's just an example. Whether they intended to do that for elephant safety or not, I don't know, but we noticed that that was a very positive for elephant movements, one less spot where there's a risk. And then electrocutions, which are becoming more and more common. There was an electrocution in a tea estate, I won't mention the name, this year, and I visited the tea estate by invitation, and they told me the story of the elephant that died there, and I asked if the fence was still there and still had the same electrical voltage and everything, and they said yes, it's still there, and they showed it to me. So they hadn't a clue that there could actually be something done. All that was doing is protecting an area that had some buildings in it and some stored things. They didn't realize that, perhaps they need some help with how to change that so it's safe, that if elephants touch it, they don't die from it, but just could be deterred. So there are safe electrical fences that can be put in. So blocking of historical migratory corridors, we see newspaper articles like this occasionally. This one is just talking about new fencing going up, power fencing. We understand it's hard to run a big tea operation and have elephants constantly coming through and breaking things or stomping plants or getting in conflict with the workers. But at what point is all the fencing and going to begin to block the movement of elephants or move them into places that they get into more trouble and cause more damage or even hurt or kill people? So it's without a coordinated effort across a larger area, it's very difficult. Here's a just picture of what's typical. If you're not familiar with happens in many or most, I should say, large tea plantations. Almost any evening you can see where elephants come through regularly. You can see the scene of a gathering of people who are shooing them away and yelling. And I think a lot of this is young male entertainment, running up to the elephants and laughing and seeing what the response is of the elephants. But elephants can kill people, and when they get highly stressed, a hit of a trunk against somebody's body can kill a human. And we see this happen often when the stress levels get too high, especially when they're protecting their young and moving through as a herd. You can really, or a large male tusker that's in the state of must, which is a high testosterone state, could actually go on a rampage. Here's a picture that shows just an elephant trying to cross a ditch. This one made it, but too often the elephants don't make it. And what can happen is overnight, say a baby goes in a deeper ditch than this and falls in and gets stuck. Well, the tea workers might be able to do something the next day, but overnight the mother elephant might be trying to dig out that baby and inadvertently basically bury the baby in mud. We've seen this again and again. We know that this is the design still recommended by the Tea Board of India, the same ditches. So, but the safe passage is a challenge in tea gardens. Here's an electrocuted elephant. It's just adjacent to a tea estate. It touched a fence. Whether that was part of the tea estate's doing or the community surrounding that tea estate, we don't know. But what we did is had volunteers just tracking what was happening, taking a photo, a GPS location, and we mapped these situations over 2 years. Often also we see houses broken down. These are on the edge of tea estates. So the workers of tea estates are often in the most vulnerable situation for conflict with elephants. And they can lose everything in a night. But elephants are hungry. They're looking for enough. They could be going after a bag of rice in that home. And a lot of harm can be done to people. and also to property. Here's a poisoned elephant. I don't remember this particular situation. We do find out what happens in the postmortem reports. The Forest Department is clearly involved in this one. I just want to show you, though, see the flower on the elephant's back. So we often find, almost every time an elephant dies, the community's gathering and they're saying prayers, they're putting flowers. People revere these elephants, they love them. So how do we coexist with them and still have agricultural production? That's going to be the challenge. And I see it as an opportunity, and let me just tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do. So here, just to show you, there's an elephant back there, and it's being blocked by this large gathering of people. It can't move towards the water. It's time to go get water. It's stuck. This is a very volatile and dangerous situation. Just an example. You know, one of the things is to listen to the communities. Here, Dr. K.K. Sarma, who's, I don't know if he's here right now, but he's he's a veterinarian who works a lot on elephants. He actually responds a lot when elephants are injured or killed in these regions. But he came and worked with one of our certified elephant-friendly growers, Tenzing Badoza, and gathered a community of farmers who are surrounding. In between the tea plantations are small farms, and many people are producing rice, and there are a lot of conflicts. But to basically engage the community in what are some of the ideas that can help reduce the conflicts. So not only are we looking at tea, but we're looking about the whole community around the tea plantations. And I just want to mention certified elephant-friendly tea. We have very specific criteria or standards that try to address the poisonings, electrocutions, movement, you know, keeping the corridors open so elephants can move between fragments that remain of forest resources, and they can move to water, safe water, and also tea plantations having a plan for human-elephant conflict reduction. So that might mean, like, for example, we have a grower, Sonia Jabbar, in Nuxalbari, she owns Nuxalbari Tea Estate in Darjeeling district of West Bengal. And what she's done is she's engaged her management staff on her 1,200-acre tea plantation that has just become certified elephant-friendly this year. And what they're doing is they basically create a protective barrier. When the elephants are moving across a corridor that cuts through her plantation, the presence of elephants means all the workers well know to move away from the elephants and let them safely pass. And there are guards there placed while the elephants are moving through, and they use mobile phones, and they basically have their own little community communication system to keep everybody safe and keep the elephants safe so they can move between two little reserve forests that are left on either side of the plantation. That's all these elephants have left. That's on the Nepal border. That's it for these elephants. If they can't move between these spots anymore, and now there's a fence at the border of Nepal that the elephants can't move through, it's the end of that specific elephant group. So it's critical what these tea growers are doing. It's very positive, and we want to tell this story to the market in the U.S. We have already begun. We've been selling, basically we're set up a corporation called Elephant Origins, and this is going to be a public benefit corporation, and our funding that comes from sales goes back and is reinvesting in these tea growing communities in conservation of elephants. And we've just begun, but we've had 2 years of testing the market with small buyers and small tea growers. And we want to scale up to involve larger growers. And basically the story of protecting elephants is selling tea in the U.S. And I can tell you that the prices that are being paid are higher than they're paying for similar products, basically similar quality products that are coming out of China or Taiwan or even other places in India with Assam teas and Darjeeling teas. So as we scale up, we invite you all to think about not just elephant-friendly tea, but how the story of nature and in this part of the world and protecting wildlife is part of that storytelling that actually is getting a huge positive consumer response. And I would encourage you all to join us and join along and watch what happens to this story. I hope to see this to be wildly successful so that we can drive change alongside all these others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Yeah, when you're looking at the landscape scale solutions in many landscapes around the world now, one of the key elements is what are the commodities, what are the agricultural products that can be grown by the population in that landscape that will lend themselves to fit within the broader conservation goals, the broader sustainability goals. And in many respects, tea, as a crop that is not eaten by elephants, has great potential as a non-conflict crop in this landscape to be a key element of the solution going forward, provided that, of course, the tea industry can survive. So the question, I guess, for the tea fellows before we leave the panel is do you, as a tea grower, see that tea can be elephant friendly? Do you see that you can coexist with elephants in the landscape, and especially if doing so will give you a premium opportunity in the market that will help to value some of the natural capital, start to bring value in the minds of tea growers, the plantation workers, that elephants in their community actually have value because they're making their jobs more sustainable and potentially making the tea more sustainable. Do you see, so let me start with you, sir. Do you see, how do you see it from a grower's perspective, this interaction with elephants in the landscape?
Now, I am absolutely convinced that we can coexist. As Prabir very correctly said, this organic estate of ours called Hathi Kuli, which I think some of you have visited and the others I hope will visit in the near future, means a place where elephants congregate. So obviously there is something about this tea garden which attracts them, whether it's the positive vibes or whether it's the fact that people do not attack them. But Lisa has been several times to Hathi Kuli. There are no barbed wire fences. There are no narrow domestic walls to prevent these beautiful pachyderms from moving in and out of Hathi Kuli freely. We have taught the workers there to coexist. As Lisa correctly said, once these elephants come in, they become a source of amusement. You find people beating drums, throwing things at them. People, I think, in the tea gardens with proper training will definitely be able to treat these beasts with the respect that they really deserve. Thank you.
I know that his organization happens to be the one that has elephants in their plantations. One of the other challenges that sustainable landscapes face is, particularly with regard to commodities, is this idea of deforestation-free commodities, which is an idea that's growing in the consumer markets around the world. That, you know, in particular, it was started with this idea of palm oil out of Indonesia. People don't want to be eating a cupcake that they think was created with palm oil that was from deforestation that displaced orangutans from their natural habitat. And this is a very powerful marketing that people are doing now in the West, and it's led to many large brand corporations around the world making pledges to stop sourcing from landscapes in which there is continued deforestation. So this is another question I'm going to address to Ketan because of his work with climate. In this world in which we have to be hypersensitive to our impact on climate, the growers of a commodity will start to suffer the consequences of actions outside their plantation if deforestation is continuing in the landscape, either for new tea that isn't theirs or for other reasons. And so one question for Ketan is, are you seeing, I know you're beginning to work in the realm of tea's impact on climate, so could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, where we are located in South Assam, unfortunately we don't have elephants. I would love to take some and bring it to Jalinga because we've got about 125 hectares of forest which we look after. So there is enough of green bed available there, a lot of land. So that, I think that is another challenge between North Assam and South Assam. So North Assam, the tea estate sizes are very compact, there's not enough additional land capacity, where in South Assam, where we are located, say for example, our tea estate is 650 hectares, our total land holding is almost double. So we have enough of buffer system within our tea estate that any kind of animals or forest as well that we look after. So there's a clear distinction between South and North Assam in that aspect. But in terms of increasing biomass, as I said, we do a lot of composting, we're doing biomass pellets, but we make sure that we keep on growing the green matter. So we don't just cut it, but we keep on growing that green matter so that only certain area is used for that purpose. So for example, the biomass pellet trials that we're doing, we're actually growing in a secure location the kind of biomass that we want to use. So we cut it and we use it only for that purpose, and we keep on growing it. So we're not cutting any wood, or we're not going to the forest, depleting the forest or anything. So in that aspect, we do look after the biodiversity and the green plants that we have.
Thank you, and you're carbon neutral, and so I think in a way making sure that the tea plantation itself is not drawing wood and creating emissions somewhere in the landscape is also an important piece of the puzzle. So that's great. I think we're open to questions from the outside now. I don't know if we have time left, but we'll end with the video we have of the event. But do we have any time for questions? I don't know I know we started a little bit late, but great. So let's open the floor to questions on the idea of the future of tea in rural communities here in Assam.
Anybody can take this question, but my question is that I understand what Lisa is saying and Conrad is saying, that the individual small planters or the big guys, they can train their staff to coexist with wildlife. But is there a landscape scale, remote sensed, remote sensing work where you can actually map the movements of elephants and then follow the movements and do your trainings in the entire corridor? Because there can be success stories when you look at them in isolation, but unless it's all tied up like a bead, you may not be able to solve problems. Another question is, has anybody studied the biodiversity that Ketan was talking? So have you compared the kind of biodiversity you have in terms of species diversity with a similar sized tea estate in the same altitude or whatever it is? Has those kind of studies been done?
I could probably answer the first one, but not the second. Is that okay? So Varun Goswami of Wildlife Conservation Society, with some support from the Balapara Foundation, has been doing, I'm not sure how many years of studying occupancy of elephants in tea estates and tea plantations in Assam. But what's interesting to me is that there's not well-mapped information that I know of a really coordinated effort to identify and really map the movements across the whole landscape. So better coordination. There's many groups working in pockets, but I think having one place, like maybe through this Asian Elephant Secretariat or some way that we can pull, really we could crowdsource people. Even villagers have smartphones. Like, really, we could do a crowdsourcing of elephant movements in a place like Assam, I believe. We do eBird. Why can't we do e-elephant, right? But I think we need that information, and you're right. I think the training should be happening in a way that connects the entire landscape and not isolated. But baby steps. We have to start somewhere. And I think what's already happening with Sonia doing this insider plantation, now she has a youth club that expands beyond the plantation, and now they're involving the forest department and farmers. And I can just see that basically that one elephant friendly, and she was doing work before we certified her as elephant friendly, so I'm not going to take credit for what Naxalbari has done at all. It's what she, as the owner of that tea plantation, has done herself. out of her love for elephants. But she's created, basically, they know the elephant movements from between that area. So that's one piece taken care of. Who's the next one, and the next, and the next? And then we string them together, we've got something. And if anyone wants to talk about that, I'd be more than happy to put energy in. I even have students who could do a lot with mapping back at the university. We've done that before, but you know, we need data, and we need to be able to know what it is that we're trying to solve and work together.
So just to add to what Lisa said, the previous director of Kaziranga National Park, Mr. Yadava, was a very tech-savvy director. And I've worked with him for a short while, and in Kaziranga, he has sent up drones. We've gone into the park at midnight, and fundamentally, this drone was mapping the elephants, identifying the rhinos, and in between, I think he saw a couple of poachers as well. But 3 or 4 days after that, we had a visit from the 33 Corps Army, and they, they had their apprehensions about flying these drones. But otherwise, that would have been the ideal way, because you can cover 100 kilometers and maybe square kilometers in maybe half an hour's time.
So ideally, all you have to do is radio collar,
They've done that. They've done that. They've done. They have done that. They have done that, but not to the extent that would probably. What is actually, rather than just mapping them, in North Bengal and Assam, there have been so many tragic accidents of elephants being hit by trains. I mean, you all must have read about it, but one accident, I think 3 or 4 were killed because these crossing the tracks and the train coming at high speed. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but on the biodiversity question, all tea estates tend towards carbon neutral because you have tea bushes, which range from 12,000 to 15,000 bushes a hectare. That's at one level. Beneath that, you have grass and weeds, which is the ground level flora. And then you have the shade trees. So I would tend to think that if you analyzed or looked at a tea estate, it would definitely be, biodiversity friendly, and more so Hathikuli, which is in the biodiversity hotspot of Kaziranga.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that work hasn't been done yet on either front. We heard from some private conversations about collaring. In Africa, they collar elephants quite frequently, especially in places that they know they're going to be in conflict or that they worry about the cutting off of migration. People want to make those decisions science-based. And so while crowdsourcing is interesting, having hard science is also good. We understand that there's some resistance within the government in India to collaring of elephants, and ethically I can see some resistance issues, but we understand there's been some resistance because certainly the funding is available, certainly the technology is available. It becomes a question of the will of the government, largely, I would argue here, to want to do that. And as I understand it, very few cases exist. I think Kaziranga may be the only one that I'm aware of in India that is doing collaring of elephants for this purpose. And while I don't love the idea of darting an elephant and putting it through that wearing a collar, it makes a huge difference to your ability to gather good data that will protect the herds into the future. Any other questions? Sorry. No more questions. Great. Well, thanks very much for your time, and thanks to my panel for their great contributions. All right.
Well, thank you so very much, Mr. Maya Korchinsky.
We have a video, sorry. We have a short video.
Absolutely. You can
I promised that we would do this, so I promised my Ketan that we would do this. So can you run the short video now? Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much to the other panelists as well. I would like to extend my heartiest thanks to Ketan Patel, Conrad, Disha, Barooah, and Lisa Mills. Thank you so very much. And ladies and gentlemen,